All right, welcome to another edition of TRILLITICS, politics from a trill perspective. This would be our second run around of these. Um, it's amazing what happens in a week. You know what I'm saying? We were just talking about entitlements last week and wondering exactly if we would have a good topic to talk about or something timely, precedent, prescient. And along comes Parkland. My guest again, Big Angry Law, host of the Big Angry and Zero show.
Yes, sir.
And welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad we have something to talk about. I hate why we have something to talk about.
Right.
Obviously, so we want to send our condolences out to the victims and the survivors of what happened at Parkland, in Parkland. And today's subject, of course, will be gun control. I'm a Second Amendment person.
Yeah, so am I, and I think it's a difficult conversation that people aren't having. I think people are shouting at each other about it. I think people are blaming the president on one side, and then the other side is just not listening to any conversation. But when you say you're a Second Amendment guy, how far of a Second Amendment guy are you? Are you for the right shall not be infringed, or do you think reasonable restrictions?
No. I think there has to be reasonable restrictions in this country. Obviously, people have the right to defend themselves and protect their families, but certain guns are out here. They're not out here for hunting. They're not out here for protection. They're out here to basically kill people. We understood that with the AK-47, but we seem to have a hard time wrapping our heads around that when it comes to the AR-15 in America. In Florida specifically. My problem is with Florida and the whole Parkland issue is not the fact that, if the kid went out and got a gun at a gun show or something like that, or bought it off the street, it'd be different. But, in Florida, you don't have to be old enough to buy beer to buy a gun. I think that's odd.
I think I like the 18-year-old age. I think you should be able to buy beer and buy marijuana at 18 as well. I'm a libertarian. I think if you can hold a gun in Iraq to serve your country, you should be able to have a gun here.
But should you have had that experience?
If you're I'm anti-war, but 18-year-olds going into the service is not going to change. My real problem with the conversations that people are having now is that, like the Washington Post just did a poll today that said half of America wants the AR-15, the Armalite 15, off of gun store shelves in America, but you have the other half that doesn't, and no one's speaking about that half. So you have this polarized electorate. You have absolutely no chance of a constitutional amendment, which that's what the left is screaming. The right has this kind of intolerance to any change.
I don't think they want a constitutional amendment. I think they just want some action.
But if you don't, if that action isn't electorally viable, right, which is the stalemate that we're
at.
Right.
They don't have the votes, regardless of whatever kind of legislation they wanted to pass right now. They couldn't.
Right. So why not instead have a present-day conversation about solutions to prevent these type of things occurring? And I had a discussion with a comedian friend out of mine out of Los Angeles, Nick Youssef, who was like, I wouldn't want guards in schools, infringing on the feeling of freedom of my children. He doesn't have children. And it's my feeling that any parent in Parkland who lost a child would readily have given up this idyllic notion of a utopian school experience and had armed guards, which there were armed guards at Parkland, just not enough, in every hall. If they would have had a secure one-way entry, one-way exit, which they didn't have at Parkland. If we stop focusing, when cops go into schools, they're going in with drug dogs to search lockers for marijuana, right?
Right.
When cops go to schools, they're arresting kids for fist fights amongst other kids, okay? Instead of giving them pops and sending them home or giving them ISS, we need cops in schools, but we need cops in schools whose only function is to protect from this new epidemic of mass shooting. And if you have that solution, Who's against that, right? Other than people that have this radical disdain for cops, which I understand. But let's take away the drug enforcement function. Let's take away the meddling in just school hand-to-hand physical combat function, because that's what happens with a lot of my clients, is they'll get in trouble at school, and then the police will come file charges on them too, which is the insanity of the new juvenile justice system. On the flip side, you have a kid like this kid, I don't even want to say his disgusting name, but he intersected with not just local law enforcement 35 times, but the FBI. And a lot of the blood is on their hands, because if you get a family violence conviction, you can't own a firearm. Well, he beat his biological mom with a vacuum cleaner. He beat his girlfriend. Those are both family members within the, according to the Florida Penal Code. So
So he shouldn't have had weapons.
Right. I mean, well, if he'd have been convicted, but they dropped the ball on it. The FBI, I mean, he was such a problem that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was involved, and nothing happened. And I will tell you, I think there was a lot of disgusting politicization after the shooting, but Trump's tweet associating the failure of the FBI to do something with the Russia investigation was probably the single most despicable and disgusting thing I've ever had an American president say or do. And I don't care what side.
Based on everything that he said, that's saying a lot.
Oh, well, I mean,
he said a lot.
We've also had 200 years of presidents. Some of them have been very bad. Some of them have been very good.
Yeah, we just put the list out.
I don't think that anyone on the right can, with a straight face, defend it. I mean, you've seen surrogates try, but it's really just reprehensible. And I do think there are a great number of people on the left who also, you know, you had all the memes where suggesting, oh, well, you know, you kill an unarmed African-American, but you arrest the white kid, and try to suggest his arrest was racism. There are plenty of African-American murderers who are safely arrested. It comes down to your conduct when you're being arrested or misconduct by the police. But it wasn't a race issue that he wasn't killed. He had thrown away his weapon, and he actually got away. He went to Subway and then McDonald's. He was smarter than the law enforcement. You know, it's not a race issue. It's not a Russia issue. It's a key. Our most precious commodity in America is our children, right?
Right.
And you know, all our gold at Fort Knox is safe as shit. Can I say shit? I don't even know if I can curse here. You know, we keep all these things. You know, banks. You know, hospitals, prisons. We keep all these things so very secure and safe. But we have school shootings all the time. And so where's our priority? Why is a museum safer than a school? Why are material items safer than children? Why don't we treat children like a more precious commodity?
Well, I mean, I knew after Newtown, when they didn't pass any legislation and, excuse me, they didn't really do anything, I knew things weren't going to change in this country.
Yeah.
But, I mean, before the phone call, I mean, I have a problem with the people he were living with. That's a big problem.
I do too, and I think they're getting a pass.
You know what I'm saying? I think they're trying to talk themselves out of culpability.
Very true.
In this situation, because you let this guy in here. First of all, I heard him talking about a gun safe yesterday.
Right.
I don't know. Most gun safes I've seen are for handguns.
Right.
They're not for rifles. They're definitely not for assault.
Well, they have full-side ones for assault rifles. Yeah, I've seen them.
Okay.
But they were talking about a keyed gun cabinet that he had a key to.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said today, how did you not know there was another key? Anything that you buy with keys come with two keys. Right. I've never seen anything that you buy that's key operated that doesn't come with two keys. But, I mean, I think that, you know, the whole point of them not knowing who this kid really was is nonsense, because that's how the kid got there. Like, hey, this kid, he's a troubled kid. Everybody around this kid,
right,
even the ones that somewhat sympathize with him as a person for what he's gone through, knew that this kid had troubles. They knew that this kid had problems.
Well, he's not even with so when his mom passed, his adopted mom passed, he went to the guardian that she had named, right? That guardian put him out of the house because she said it's the guns or this house. So then he goes to the second home of one of his childhood friends. How does he not know? How does the family not know that this kid has been terrorizing other children for the last 4 or 5 years?
Right.
He's been beating girls.
How did you let this person in your house
Right.
without doing any kind of simple background work? This is not police detective work.
Right.
To find this stuff out.
And how do you? I don't know. I couldn't agree more. What do you think about him and the death penalty? Are you a death penalty abolitionist? Are you?
No. I think if you do the crime, you do the time.
See, my issue with the death penalty generally is that it disparately impacts the poor and, of course, minorities, and no one can argue that.
And the mentally disabled.
Right. Well, the conservatives can argue that I'm obviously, but I can't be a death penalty abolitionist because there are a few people that need it, right? And, his public defender sitting there talking about how remorseful is, some shit you just can't come back from. You go kill 17 people instead. Like, did you hear the story of Peter Wang, the 15-year-old?
Yeah.
15-year-old in his ROTC uniform, freshman, holds the door, lets other kids escape until he dies. Scott Beagle, the school teacher, unlocks the door to let kids in. While he's locking it back, he's shot and killed. And I can't remember his name, but did you see the African-American kid who took, I think, 5 bullets holding the door? He lived. Borges, I think is his name. Lived, and, he's an American hero. Peter Wang should be given a full military funeral, even though he was just junior ROTC. I mean, these stories are horrible, and I just can't.
And
I
these
can't
are all
forgive
children
him. Right.
we're talking about.
Well, Beagle's
except
a
for the
teacher, but I can't forgive him, right? I don't know, and maybe that's not that's not the Christian way, but I think this guy needs the death penalty, and I don't know what are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't see why he deserves to be able to breathe and live his life and learn how to do all go forward in any way. I mean, this was completely premeditated. This was something you had been wanting to do. You had been bragging about this for some time. And so this is what happens to those people. And you chose not to, I guess they say take the coward's way out and kill yourself. So this is the other side of that. And this is what you knew you were getting into. So you get what you got coming to you. I'm not going to cry any tears for him.
So you have a lot of pundits saying that we shouldn't even be discussing it or paying any attention to it. I don't think that's right. I think we need to have discourse in America until we find the solution. But what are your thoughts on it?
As far as what, like when they say we shouldn't discuss school shooters and
school
things
shooters
like
are gun control.
We shouldn't say that. No, well, we've got to discuss gun control in this country. And I think the problem that we can't have a pure discussion is because of the fact that the NRA has completely infiltrated our congressional process.
Well, I mean, money infiltrates our entire American political system. But,
it's not. It hasn't been as long and as prevalent as it is with corporations like the NRA.
Well,
you may have individuals that have their motives or whatever, like a Soros or the Koch brothers or whatever, people who are trying to spend a lot of money to try to get things their way. I can understand that. But when you talk about these corporations and the NRA is just the whipping boy for, the Colt 45.
Right, they're a lobbyist for gun, but
that's all they are. It's just a big lobby. I don't think the American public really even realize that.
Okay.
They're just a conduit.
I mean, they do protect our rights to own guns. I mean, there was a period in your life, right, where your life was continually in danger, right, where you were Mr. and I hate to use it, but Mr. Third Coast Gangster Rap, right? And
well, I mean, just Mr. Surviving in the Third Coast. You didn't have to be a rapper to have to.
Right, but it was exemplified because clearly, I'm not going to say you were a mark man, but clearly there were people.
I'm just the voice of it.
Right,
I'm just the voice.
But there were people that could make themselves famous by coming after you, right? So there was a period of time in your life
to this day.
Where you didn't sleep in the same city where you had a concert or where you spent the night at an airport, where everyone knew that you were armed and you were the guy that was going to, I mean, I could be wrong. These are stories I hear, that you were the guy that would protect you and Pimp C if someone came at y'all. And that the fact that it was known that you were armed was a deterrent. And if the NRA was involved, wasn't involved, maybe you don't have the right to carry the shotgun or the firearm that you were carrying.
No, I wasn't carrying it legally anyway, so all that stuff goes out the window in my case. But I understand.
Right.
I understand where you're going.
But you protected yourself, and that's the thing. If we get to the point where everything's illegal, then it's only the criminals. It's only the bad people. Like, you never carried a gun in anger. You weren't out there criming. It was to protect yourself and the people you love and the people you do business with.
Let's say
that. Okay. But that's Grandpa Bun that I believe in.
Yeah,
But the thing is, if we take, there's so many guns in America. If we start restricting the access of guns to lawful Americans, we're the only ones that don't have them, right? It's not, and so I really think the solution is not ratcheting up gun control. It is instead dialing down drug enforcement, dialing down citation enforcement, and dialing up returning policemen to the watchman function, which they're not. Right now, they're revenuers and prohibition agents. That's all they fucking are.
So why keep the AR-15 in circulation?
Well, here's the problem.
Why?
Okay,
I mean, what purpose does the AR-15 rifle serve other than to kill human beings?
Okay.
Because nobody hunts with that gun. You know this. I know this.
But
Nobody hunts with that gun.
Here's the problem. First of all, the Second Amendment isn't about hunting. It's about being able to fight back against a totalitarian government.
Right. It's written in a totally different time.
Well,
you can still smell the British.
But if we are expanding the concept of so many amendments, if we're expanding the concept of our Bill of Rights to include the right to abortion, or all the gymnastics we do to treat this document like it's so much more expansive than it was when it was written, but yet narrowing and further narrowing. And Clarence Thomas just wrote a dissent this week on the Supreme Court's refusal to hear a Second Amendment case. They haven't heard a Second Amendment case in, I think, 8 years. And it's because they're just allowing these lower courts to further narrow this amendment. The amendment, it wasn't for hunting. It was for being able to protect yourself, period. And you could say, oh, well, the Army's going to defeat anybody. Well, they didn't do that to go to job in Iraq and Afghanistan against the very same thing. I'm not saying I want legal insurrection, but I think battling about the Second Amendment is the wrong thing. I think what we need to be battling about is having more freedom, not less freedom in America, and having our police more focused on protecting the kids, like a bank. You know, treat schools. We know this is an epidemic. We know that we're not ever going to have enough voters to pass gun legislation. So let's just put that aside and let's focus purely on how do we create safe zones. Because here's the thing. We have these no-gun zones for schools, but when there's a problem, the first thing we do is call people with guns to run to the gun-free zones to protect us with guns. Why not have cops that aren't messing with kids? Because that's what goes on now in schools. All these cops are doing are searching backpacks, searching lockers, searching cars, looking for weed. Fuck the weed, man. I don't care. I would rather know for sure that kids are safe. And I really don't give a shit about everyone screaming at each other and arguing about the Second Amendment because I don't give a fuck. I just want to know that children are safe.
So who controls that? Is that Betty DeVos? You know, because my wife talks about it. Like, where is our Secretary of Education right now?
Well, she's trying to send everybody to private schools that no one can afford except the rich.
She's charter heavy.
Yeah.
That's her thing. She's not even about public schools. She's super charter heavy.
She's about diverting public school funds to private institutions, which is just cronyism. I paid for my kids to go to private school without a tax break as soon as I could afford it. They went to public school for a while. But that was on me. That was a decision I made, and I owned it, right? I don't need the government subsidizing it.
I need the government giving public school system what they need.
Exactly.
For better schools in general. But then you get the issue of when you do build this better school, right? I look at Chicago and what they did with Chicago. They built this brand new school, right? And they're saying, we want to take the kids out of this school, shut them down, take the kids out of that school, shut them down, and send them all to this school. But the kids from those two schools have never gotten along. No. They see each other on the street at a football game or at the movies or something. They're going to fight anyway. Why would you put them in the same classroom together?
But here's the thing. We have to I would rather see a Gestapo-like atmosphere.
Be very careful, libertarian, where you walk here.
Well, no, I'm talking about in schools. If a school has such problems that we can't trust the kids not to, and I don't care about fistfights, but we can't trust the kids not to shoot each other or stab each other or real harm to each other, then I think I want to create safety. And that's, you look at like Baltimore and Detroit and even parts of Houston.
But why are we so excitable about gun violence? Because let's be honest. Let's be very honest about this. These shootings are not happening in the inner city.
I agree.
But the inner city has their own issues where their schools deserve more security and better standards.
Oh no, I agree.
Why do we only have this conversation when the white school gets shot up? That's what I don't understand.
Well, I think some people are afraid of the, I think if a white person broaches it, you have the fear of being labeled a racist. But it's a real problem. If you're a successful kid in inner city Baltimore, clearly it was, The Wire, I think, is probably the most authentic television show ever made.
Absolutely.
And it focused
honest about it.
Right. It focused on that these kids in inner city Baltimore, which was a true story based on a real study, that if they are academically successful, if they are striving to rip open the window of opportunity that's denied most people from inner city Baltimore, that they are then antagonized and held to account for this striving by their own peers, which is insane. But I mean, and I don't know the solution to that. And I don't think, it's easy for a white person to say, oh, that's a black problem. No, there's plenty of white people that celebrate gangster culture too, right?
There's kids that don't think school is cool. That's where it all kind of boils down to. Now, how uncool they think school is may vary from the schools you talk to. But there are always going to be an element at any school in America that are going to think school isn't cool. And anybody that thinks school is cool is not cool.
Right.
And we're not cool with that.
What do you, like if...
The Fonz or something? I don't know. Shit's always been there.
Well, let's say at the height of UGK, when there was this, when you're spitting murder, what do you think that impact has on children's perceptions of what they should do? You think they can separate the art and the lyricism from reality? Do you think
I separated it when I heard it from NWA, when I heard it from Ice-T. But I mean, I can't speak to what every kid does, and nobody ever asks about my kids. That's the problem I always have when they want to ask rappers about how they think their lyrics and their music affects other kids. Nobody ever asks me how do I feel about what my children hear. If I'm
your kids are awesome.
Can protect. Well, all I'm saying is, if I can protect my kids from me, why should I be worried about protecting my kids from you?
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
That's what I was getting to. That's the whole function. Is that instead of having a conversation about, one of the issues that everyone's been screaming about is toxic masculinity. That's the new word, and the new term of art to condemn.
I think Michael Ian Black said it best. He said, we don't have a gun problem, we have a boy problem. Boys are broken in this country.
But see, I think boys are broken. I don't think, because we hear the term toxic masculinity, we have this constant assault on manhood, and I don't think there are enough fathers in the house. I didn't have a dad in my house, right? I had him every other weekend sometimes.
But then we say,
you got to learn how to be a man on your own.
Then we say, but you didn't go out and shoot people, right? Now this is a varying thing, right? What's the variant?
But I think
I think that's what America keeps trying to figure out. What is the variant that makes a kid that's depressed go from, just cutting himself to actually wanting to carry out, a violent act against random people?
Well, I think you do see a link between the willingness to hurt animals, like this Cruz kid did, and other people, and you see the other sociopaths. But I really think think about how many people or women that don't have a male figure for their male children in their household. And I think it's harder for every man that doesn't grow up. My children love me. But if you asked them to describe me and they were being honest and didn't think I'd hear, they'd say, he's a fucking asshole, right? Because, there's a lot of carrot. I try to do for them, but I've always been like, no, fuck that, get back to work, Right. And people can say, tough love is, but I think why it was such a hard road for me earlier in life, and that I had to have academic success later after going and working bullshit jobs and going back to school. I think it's because, I had a part-time dad, a very rare dad. And I think a dad needs to be there to put a foot in your ass. And I don't think a lot of these school shootings happen if dad is there putting a foot in the boy's ass. And clearly it's a gender issue, right? Clearly it's men doing this.
Right.
But, and I think women suffer in different ways. I think this whole culture of glorifying strippers and, yeah, I think that's downstream from them not worrying about what the fuck their dad's going to think about them, right?
Right.
Now, that clearly isn't as harmful to America as mass shootings, but I think we need to, instead of screaming toxic masculinity...
I disagree. In the black community, it could be devastating. We can have devastating results. We can end up with an entire generation of women with, body tattoos and implants and different things like that.
I'm not judging anybody about tattoos or implants.
I
love them both, but
it becomes a situation where what alternative images are we sending the children?
Where's the shame, right?
Again, I always go to culpability. Like, who's culpable for this? You know what I'm saying?
Well, and that's the question. What's the solution when you see the divorce rates, both in the African American community, the Caucasian, across America, what's the solution? Why aren't people fighting? You look at your marriage. Y'all have been together for a very long time. You raised your children. You know, you look at my marriage. I mean, obviously, I fight with my wife. You know, we've got to the point where we don't even want to talk to each other at times. But the thing is, we got kids, we're a family, and, you know, we're both products of divorce. I think my mother-in-law's been divorced like 4 times. We're both products of broken homes, so I think we had a greater appreciation for sticking together. But I mean, you've stuck together. What do you think the glue there was, and why didn't you follow the trend of the rest of America?
Well, I mean, you gotta fight for your marriage,
Right.
too. That's something that I don't think a lot of married people tend to talk about. Now, I know we're supposed to be talking politics, but maybe this is the politics of marriage. But you got to be willing to fight for your marriage. You know what I'm saying? You got to recognize if and when potentially you're growing in a different direction. You got to realize when, you know, the moments where you used to sit and talk at dinner and now you just kind of eat in silence. You know, you got to recognize and acknowledge those things. You got to recognize when you're not giving enough to your marriage. You got to, you know, you got to acknowledge that stuff, and you got to communicate. You have to talk it out, because none of that stuff is just going to go away.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So.
Well, it's this consumer culture. We all want to be immediately happy all the time, and we don't think unhappiness is something we deserve. I personally think that we over-prioritize happiness, and I think it's transitioned to our children, and I think that plays a role in this, that if shit goes wrong for people, they think it's the end of the world. And sometimes when you think it's the end of the world, you want to take other people out with you, you know? And it's, I don't know. We got to get back to working hard. I don't know.
No, thank you for coming in, as always, Charles.
Thank you, sir.
That's another edition of TRILLITICS, politics from a Trill perspective. Let's hope to God that our next subject matter doesn't come at the price of our children. You know, let's. I don't know how I feel about cops in every school, but at the same time, I don't want cops at the school that my grandkids go to. So maybe I might have to give in on that one. See you guys next week.